She left the house that afternoon. Just walked. No direction. No purpose. She wandered into an old bookstore she hadn't noticed before, tucked between a florist and a tea shop that had long since closed. The air inside smelled like dried roses and burnt paper. She didn't remember picking anything up, but when she reached the counter, her hands were holding a slim, red-bound album. The man at the register looked at her without blinking and said, "He waited a long time." She opened the album on instinct. Inside, pages of wedding portraits, vintage, grayscale, silent. On the third page, her breath hitched. There she was, again, the same dress, the same veil. But in this one, the groom's face wasn't scratched, it was blurred, like a motion caught just before stillness. His eyes were turned toward her, but unfocused, as if he hadn't yet realized she wasn't going to say yes. A gold ring glinted on her hand in the photo, but it looked tarnished, worn from waiting. She left the shop without paying, without speaking. The album remained in her bag, even though she never remembered placing it there. That night, the air inside the house felt thicker. Time moved wrong. The clock slowed. Her steps echoed. The photo lay on the floor now, face down, but when she passed it, a whisper brushed against her ear. You turned away before. The lights flickered once, and in the brief shadow cast across the wall, she saw two figures. One standing, one kneeling. The mirror in the hallway had cracked, not shattered, just one clean fracture across the middle, like a line drawn through memory. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She simply walked to her closet, reached behind the coats, and pulled out the box she didn't know was there. Inside, the veil yellowed, waiting. The moment her fingers touched it, she remembered the temple, the incense, the silence after her footsteps faded. And for the first time, the voice didn't sound distant. It sounded present, in the room, in her chest, in her hands. This time it said, "Please stay." She didn't answer the voice, not out loud, but her hands stopped shaking. She folded the veil again and placed it gently on the bed, smoothing out the edges like muscle memory long buried. That night, she didn't sleep, but she did dream. Or maybe it was something else. She stood in a room, lit only by candlelight, the scent of sandalwood thick in the air, and rows of empty chairs stretched behind her, all facing a table set with nothing but two small bowls and a single gold ring. A man stood at the other end, his face still blurred, but his hands were trembling, reaching across the space between them, like he wasn't sure she was really there. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, but her eyes burned, and when she blinked, the scene faded, but the ache stayed. The next morning, the gold ring was on her nightstand. She didn't touch it, just stared. The photo was gone now, vanished, not misplaced, but she could still see it perfectly in her mind. Every crease, every shadow, every scratch carved across the absent groom's face. She made tea, though she didn't drink it. Music played faintly in the background again, those same strings, rising and falling like breath. She walked to the window. The reflection showed the street, the trees, the empty sky, but not her, not fully, just a faint outline, as if she were slowly fading into whatever had been waiting. She picked up the ring. It was cold, heavy, and when she slid it onto her finger, it clicked into place like it had never left. The house grew quiet. Even the air stopped moving. Then the doorbell rang. Once, sharp, clear, she opened the door. No one was there, but on the ground another envelope. No name this time, just a wax seal she didn't recognize but knew anyway. Inside, a second photo. Her again, same dress. But this time, the groom's face was clear and smiling, and beside the photo, a note in delicate handwriting. "Thank you for coming back." She sat down on the steps, photo in hand, veil in her lap, ring on her finger, and when she looked up, the sky seemed older. Like it, too, had been waiting. The room held its breath as if the walls themselves dared not interrupt. Outside, nothing moved, not wind, not time. Even the clock on the far wall had surrendered, its hands stilled in quiet reverence. She could not tell if her feet were touching the ground anymore, only that she was not falling. Her body felt distant, like a dress draped over memory, not flesh. Somewhere behind her ribs, a warmth bloomed gently, like the first light of a forgotten dawn. But it was not hers. It was his. A presence so familiar it ached, the kind of ache you don't cry over, because it feels like home, like closure finally granted to a story that had been echoing too long without an ending. She felt the whisper before it came, a low murmur vibrating beneath her skin, not in words, but in longing, the soft pull of a name spoken not aloud, but across lives. She didn't hear it, she remembered it. And with that memory came the rest, the first hand held beneath temple lanterns, the stolen glance across incense smoke, the final letter left unanswered on a windowsill. A veil worn once before and dropped in shame, a man waiting beneath the altar alone, dressed not for ceremony but for burial. And her, his bride, not cruel, just afraid, not vanishing but fracturing. And now, reassembled, her fingers twitched slightly as the lace shifted again across her arms, wrapping tighter, then looser, then simply settling. The photo on the table was fully changed now. The groom stood whole beside her, no longer faded, no longer angry, just still. Grieving had ended. Only waiting remained, a kind of waiting that reshaped everything it touched. She took one step forward, or the veil did. The mirror across the room no longer reflected her. It showed a room lit by golden lanterns, the scent of sandalwood heavier now, the sound of strings low and steady somewhere beyond the threshold. Her breath returned not in panic, but rhythm. The inhale was hers. The exhale was not. It belonged to another chest, another heartbeat, another memory whose pulse she now shared. The gold ring on her finger shimmered once faint, but final. A seal, a key, a promise made flesh. She walked toward the table, though it no longer felt like a table in her home. It was now an altar, a crossroad, a doorway that had never really closed, and waiting at the edge of it was not a ghost, not a monster, not vengeance, just a groom, just love, preserved in sorrow, shaped in waiting, and finally answered. The moment held longer than breath, deeper than light, and then passed. She blinked. The incense had burned out. The photo was gone. No trace on the table. No lace on her arms. Just her, standing alone in her living room, barefoot, still wearing the simple white dress, now marked at the hem with a single gray thread that hadn't been there before. She didn't cry, didn't collapse, just breathed. And for the first time in weeks, it felt entirely her own. But on the mirror's edge, a new detail had formed, a faint outline of two people, side by side, walking away down a corridor lined with candlelight, and above the frame, where dust should have gathered, a handwritten line had appeared, barely visible in gold. Forever means when you're ready. She didn't reach to wipe it off. Some things are meant to stay. Some promises don't fade, especially the ones you remember only after you've kept them. And sometimes, just sometimes, when she stood too long at the threshold of sleep, she would feel something brush her shoulder. Not a touch, a memory of one, as if a promise had reached out to be remembered. The gold mark on her finger never faded. It stayed faint, like heat that never fully cooled. Her friends said she had changed, softer, quieter, that she sometimes paused mid-sentence, as if listening to something just out of reach. She didn't explain. There were no words that made sense of dreams inherited from a life unlived. The house remained calm, though on windless nights the chimes outside still moved, just slightly, just enough. And sometimes the scent of sandalwood returned for no reason at all. Once she found a pressed flower beneath her pillow. White, fragile, nothing she had ever picked, but it smelled like the past. She placed it in a book she never opened again. The mirror remained untouched. The fingerprint never faded. She stopped seeing her reflection as just her own. In its eyes, there was always someone else, watching gently, waiting for nothing. Not for answers, not for release, just presence. The kind that stays when everything else forgets. And late, on the nights when the world was too still to lie to herself, she would close her eyes, touch the ring mark, and feel the echo of a voice that had once waited lifetimes just to say, "You came back."